Life Audio.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer. We'll start the conversation with Peggy and her guests next.
The best-selling illustrated Bible for kids and teens, the Action Bible, is now better than ever. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is an interactive Bible specifically created for kids and teens ages 7 to 15. The Faith in Action Edition is designed to engage young readers in God's Word through hundreds of vividly illustrated Bible stories in chronological order with activities and games. Readers will grow in God's Word by using QR codes, providing free access to over 2,000 devotionals, hundreds of prayers, character stories, teaching videos, maps, timelines, and much more. Additionally, the Action Bible Faith in Action Edition allows readers to explore the major themes of the Bible like courage, faith, hope, love, service, trust, and wisdom. Each theme provides practical advice on how to live out God's Word. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is the best interactive Bible you can purchase for your child or teen. Purchase your copy today at Sam's Club, Barnes & Noble, or Amazon.
Want to learn more about God and His will for your life, one verse at a time? I'm Quinice Petway, co-host of the Your Daily Bible Verse podcast. I'm inviting you to tune in and subscribe at lifeaudio.com.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com. Here's Peggy Ployer.
Today we are going to talk about, should I give my student an official diagnosis? And we have special guest today, Tasha Douglas. Tasha will be with us in just a moment. So I'm going to get done with some housekeeping things while we are waiting for her to get through traffic and get to her computer to join us. She said she'd just be here in a couple minutes. So, I want to thank all of you who submitted questions ahead of time. We got quite a few for Tasha, so those will be included in this conversation, as well as we have some questions that Tasha and I thought up ahead of time, questions that parents typically ask her when she is doing assessments for their students. So you'll want to join in this conversation if you're just watching, listening on the recorded session. If you're watching live, and I see people are popping on right now, just know that you can submit questions live as well. And we'd love to take those and include those in our conversation too. So as we're talking about, should I get an official diagnosis for my student? And I know a lot of homeschool parents ask this question. Now in the public school, a lot of times to access resources for students who have various learning challenges or difficulties, an assessment is required. But it's not so much required when you homeschool. So I'm going to approach just a little bit of that information ahead of time. And then Tasha's going to help us understand a little bit more from the clinical side. But when I have worked with parents in the past, we have gone back and forth. What do you need the evaluation to tell you? What is it that you're struggling to understand about where your student needs help, needs assistance, needs assistive technology? And by the way, next broadcast, we're going to be talking about assistive technology as well. So that may be helpful if you're kind of thinking in that realm too. So just know that there's lots of different reasons why people get diagnoses or don't get diagnoses when their student is homeschooled. And guess what? My guest is here. Welcome, Tasha.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's so good to see your face. We've chatted a couple times, and now I get to see you again. Tasha was a guest on this show a long time ago. Yes. So I'm glad to have you back.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we've had quite a few people submit questions ahead of time. They say that
Okay.
this is a topic we definitely need to address. And we even
Awesome.
had a comment before the show. They left a comment. Kindergarten Homeschool said this is such an important topic,
Yeah.
and so just know that that we'll probably get a lot of views, a lot of listens on this episode because a lot of parents, they sit on the fence and go, do I? Don't I? I mean, I came in with a diagnosis to homeschooling, and I think some parents just do when they choose to homeschool. They've already been in the public school system. Their child's had a diagnosis. But
Right.
for parents who have homeschooled, maybe started homeschooling older siblings and realize, I've got this child and I don't know exactly what's
What
going
to do.
on.
Yeah.
This tends to be the biggest question: is a diagnosis necessary, and then what would I use it for? So I think
Right.
we're going to dig into the meat of that, and I'm excited for you to be able to share your expertise in this area with our families. So to kind of kick it off, I would love for our audience to get to know you again, and so
Awesome.
tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Awesome. Well, all in a nutshell, I'm an educational diagnostician. But to give you a little background history, I've been in education since '97. I've done 16 years of classroom teacher. And to be a certified diagnostician, you have to have classroom experience. So it's very important to be able to help those teachers with those recommendations and accommodations.
Right.
Then I did 10 years of diagnostician out in the public school systems. I've worked with school districts, private schools, learning centers, and even parents who have for homeschool. So it's the same federally mandated spectrum. Even if you're not in the school, those rules still apply for those kiddos who are homeschooled. And a lot of my parents don't know that. They're wondering, do we get those same support system? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And then fast forward, I'm now working on my doctorate degree. I have just finished my classes. I'm so excited about that. About 3 weeks ago, I'm working on my dissertation. And my doctoral degree is in executive educational leadership. So I'm still looking forward to supporting schools and leading, on another level so we can help our kids in special needs. And that's why I chose that field to stay in the same field. I'm working on my dissertation now, hopefully to graduate in August of this year or December, depending on my dissertation process. So I'm excited about that. And now my top assessment consulting has been around for many years, as you know, Peggy.
Yes. I refer a lot of people because Tasha's local to me. So people ask, who do I go to? I'm like, you go to Tasha.
I always ask where they hear, Sped Homeschool. And so I get a lot of clients from Sped Homeschool. Me and Peggy have been working together as partners for a good while. So, and we worked very well together. I'm so happy to be a part of her team and her a part of mine. So it's where I am in a nutshell. For the past, I think it's been about 3 years since I've done the webcast, but the business has been there for many years, and we're just here to support the community. And what I offer more than most, I am available on weekends for my parents, and I'm available for the summer. And it has to be appointment, of course, because my staff, so I can give them a head notice about Saturday events. But I am accessible to my parents other than the school day. And that really works great with my especially my homeschool parents, because their schedule is a little bit different and they have more flexibility, so they're able to meet those needs. So
And it's good that you point that out, because a lot of times the diagnosis, the diagnostic process, all of that stops when the last day of school happens, and parents panic because they contact the school in the summer and they're like, what do you mean I have to wait till August, September? Yes, that is very typical. And so having somebody available like you who doesn't stick to that schedule and can fill in those gaps
most definitely
is very helpful. Absolutely. Especially as parents, a lot of times homeschool parents, this is our time where we're evaluating what curriculum we're going to use next year, what supports our students need in place, and as we kind of evaluate how the year prior went and how we're going to move forward. And so having some additional information, and I'm sure we're going to talk about some what that is going to be helpful to make the right choices and to not spend your money in the wrong place. There's a lot of different things involved. So Very cool. So I think we're going to start maybe with some of the questions that we talked about, and then we're going to add in some, I'll kind of mix in some of our viewer questions that came in ahead of the broadcast. And if we have any live, we'll include those as well.
Okay.
But if a child is having a learning difficulty, what is the process of even that parents would go about to get an assessment for that child?
So if they're looking for outside assessment, just give an example for my business, what we would do, I love consulting first. We would have a consultation. I believe it's,
Okay.
I, as a person, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, I like to be informed. Give me the information so I don't like to be lost in the midst of what I'm doing.
Right.
And be prepared ahead of time. So I always like to consult first. So the parent and I, whoever they want to be a part of the meeting, it can be mom, dad, their teacher, grandma, whoever you have assigned as part of your child's educational team. Yeah. We will meet and we'll just go over the preliminaries of what it means to evaluate a kid. What's the process? And so the first thing my parents ask is, okay, they're not sure what direction to go with the evaluation. So basically, I get some background information. We fill out a parent information form. It's very simple. It's nothing that, you just have to give me the most information you can about your child, right. Past, present, and give me a little history about if they have any siblings. If you have siblings, that have trouble, difficulty, because sometimes, parents have been through the process before, but not sure how to go about it with the second child or the third child.
Got it.
So we would do a consultation. Once we do that, which would probably take about 30 minutes, unless we want to meet again for more information, I send out some documentation for you just to give you an idea of what the process looks like formally. But we also do talk about the details of the evaluation itself. So let's just say if we have a student that's struggling, and a lot of the kids, they have strengths. And I like to tell parents,
absolutely,
they have strengths.
Yes.
They really do. And what we do first is look at what the areas of need are, but I also want to know what their strengths are. Yes. So if they have struggling in reading, but they're strong in math. So we would look at an educational evaluation. So what that would entail is we would do what's called an intellectual cognitive ability test. It's a state-mandated test. It's something that's standardized. It's formal. And it's looking at the student across the board for their age. So this is not like tests in the homeschool test or classroom tests. Those are informal. It's subjective. These tests are strictly based on what they can do without any support of mom, dad, or whoever the educator is. Then we would do another evaluation would be the academic piece. It's called achievement. The intellectual piece and the achievement piece are like brother and sister. They're one and the same. They're together. They're family. So when you have the intellectual piece, based on that cognitive ability, it will let you know how well they're able to perform. Typically, the areas we look at is reading, math, and writing. Because those three areas affect every other area.
Yes, they absolutely do.
They do. Reading, writing, and math. Because you got math and science have some similarities. Then you have reading and language arts. So we typically evaluate in those areas. And then once we evaluate in intellectual ability and cognitive, we look at language area. So we want to make sure we don't have to do formal evaluation. It depends on the recommendation. If they're not having any speech concerns or language deficiencies or language barriers, because we have a lot of kids that trying to figure out two different languages sometimes, and it masks as if there's academic, and sometimes it's not academic, it's the language. So I pick assessments based on what's best for that child.
That's good to know.
If I find if the child is heavy, having difficulty with language, I wouldn't choose an assessment that's heavy in language. I don't want them to be struggling in an area that's most difficult for them. I want to have the best result for them that meets their need and not mask for something else.
Yes.
So those are typically the
there are some different options then, and consulting with you ahead of time that gives you kind of an idea of how to lay that path for testing to be most effective and the results to give the most information. After a word from our sponsor, we'll dive back into this conversation. The best-selling illustrated Bible for kids and teens, the Action Bible, is now better than ever. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is an interactive Bible specifically created for kids and teens ages 7 to 15. The Faith in Action Edition is designed to engage young readers in God's Word through hundreds of vividly illustrated Bible stories in chronological order with activities and games. Readers will grow in God's Word by using QR codes, providing free access to over 2,000 devotionals, hundreds of prayers, character stories, teaching videos, maps, timelines, and much more. Additionally, the Action Bible Faith in Action Edition allows readers to explore the major themes of the Bible like courage, faith, hope, love, service, trust, and wisdom. Each theme provides practical advice on how to live out God's Word. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is the best interactive Bible you can purchase for your child or teen. Purchase your copy today at Sam's Club, Barnes & Noble, or Amazon.
Hey there, it's Nicole Eunice from the How to Study the Bible podcast, and I'd love to invite you to join us as we weekly discover a passage of God's Word together. From beginning to end, from principles to practicals, we are here to make sure that God's Word is powerful and relevant to your life. If that sounds like something you're looking for, I would love to invite you to subscribe. You can go to lifeaudio.com and search How to Study the Bible, and we'll see you there.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.
Most definitely. Before we begin, we do, and parents are so comfortable once they get that information, and then we set up maybe 2 or 3 testing dates. I always say 3 in case something comes up and they get sick or ill and we have to reschedule. We already got it planned. And so we do 2. I like to do at least 2. I feel like doing 2 sets of testing in one day is a lot for a kid. So I think we break it up in 2 sessions, do a cognitive one day and academic another day, and keep that third testing option open just in case. And then, but parents like to know, well, how long is it going to take?
Yes.
And, and I let them choose the dates. I'm flexible. We can do weekends, the summer. It's whatever. I'm here to support them. So I never put them on a stringent timeline. Right. It's about what's most comfortable and available for that kid. And I like to make sure my kids are getting breaks, and give them time to get water. We have snack. I give them a whole itinerary. A lot of my kids don't want to leave. They get so much attention from me. Because I give them, they have lunch and they take a little break and they bring their lunch and if they don't need a break, that's fine. But we always have a waiting area. So my parents are welcome to stay. You don't have to leave. My office have a waiting area for you to stay. You can watch TV, read a magazine, do some work, catch up on work. So I make it real convenient for my kids and my parents. Yeah.
That's really cool. I don't think that's always the case for a lot of other testing facilities. Because we got a question from one parent. It was Kathy S. She said, how can the results obtained from testing be accurate when the testing is so lengthy and stressful for the child? And so if a family maybe is not local here in Texas, in League City, we're in the south end of Houston, and maybe they have this type of option, what kind of advice would you have to give to a family that feels like this is just going to put my child in overload? Are they going to get accurate results? What should they ask for, and what can they ask for from an evaluator?
Well, that's a good question. I actually have a parent that came out of town from Odessa. And they flew in because they couldn't find anybody that they felt comfortable with out there, and they knew about my business. So they flew out. What I did, that's a really good question. So I go back to breaking the assessments up. So we break them, I chunk them. Okay. And one of the things there's 2 outliers on the evaluation that we have to take part in. We have to observe what state the child is in. If that child, if my observations of that child feel like that they're so tired and exhausted, or they're distracted and they can't focus, I'm going to stop the evaluation. That's just part of what you're supposed to do federally. Okay. You have to check 2 boxes on most evaluations to say, okay, what were your observations of this kid? So if I feel like that they are not, if we've done a part of the testing and I, take a break and I explain to mom or dad, hey, I noticed Johnny had been, couldn't stay focused, and he was just blurting out answers. I didn't feel comfortable fulfilling this part of the test. I think we need to stop. Let's come back to tomorrow or the day after. So that's an observation I take as a professional, as an expert in this area. These are the children's lives, and this is something they're going to carry with them. They're going to have as a part of a support system for them, not just for this grade level. It takes them on, and we should be evaluating every 2 years, no more than 3. Every child should be, they should be, anything past that, it becomes, it can be a real big issue, not keeping up with that's academic area or of need for that child. So between 2 to 3 years. Once we finish the evaluation at the end, I have to look at the evaluation is not, and Mom, whoever gave, that's a really good question, because most people think that the evaluation is just formal. By law, we have to include informal data. So that would include the sociological background, that includes the vision and hearing screening, that includes the emotional behavior, meaning that they may not be formally evaluated, but I have to do an observation. I have to pull data and see, okay, Mom, how do they act at home? How is their attentiveness at home? So I have to look at multiple sources of data, and that's how you get accuracy. I tell my parents that you don't want your child to be diagnosed by a formal evaluation solely. That is unfair, because some kids don't take tests well. Some kids may rush through tests, So it's very meticulous of how we put that data together and form that report. So it's a reassurance to the parents to let them know that why Johnny has been doing great in reading and not math, when I evaluated him, those results show, but it's because he may not be as interested in math or reading, not because he don't have the ability.
Right. Yes.
And so they get really shocked and like, wow, and we look at all the areas and we determine based on all of those areas, okay, this is a valid, accurate evaluation because of all, not just the formal evaluation, but the informal. Okay. And the last thing I want to speak on is something called exclusionary factors. We have to look at the surroundings, the environment.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to look at how consistent they're getting education. They're at homeschool, but I want to know, okay, what's the plan? What are you guys working on? And how long you work on that? I'm like, okay, good. So we just have a background of what the system is. And you don't have to have the same system as the public school system, but we know what they're learning and have a background of what they're learning. We also look at health history. So we don't want medical history. We want to look at, do they have any what's called ear tubes, things like that. Kids.
Lots of ear infections and
ear infections. Yes. We look at what are some of the things that you have talked with your doctor about medically. I have some parents that have some kids that are ADHD or may have some anxiety, things like that. So when I get that, and that's what's on the parent information, Peggy. So when I get the parent information, I already know what testing tools is best for my student. Yeah. Because I get that background information first.
Right.
And once I get that, then I know how to tailor make that evaluation for that student. And the lengthiness is going to be chunked. So you're not going to get an overwhelming evaluation in one sitting. Right. That is a choice I do. Some schools, they'll do all of it in one day. And I think it's just too much. We need to break it up and give them time to take a break, go eat lunch,
And I think the schools too are just so overloaded that they just have, the way they book them, they just, get them all in and get as many done as possible. And that's unfortunate for the students because they don't get thorough of testing in that environment, which we got one question from a parent who kind of gave the opposite question, though. Okay. She says,
if we've
done private testing, is it also a benefit to get public school testing done? Because she's thinking just that a private tester would only do the neuropsych and the school would only do the educational if we plan to remain as homeschoolers. So from what I hear you saying is that you're doing both.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I have an LSSP, which is a licensed special school psychologist. And what they do is, and in the school district, outside the school district, when you're working on a psychological report, you have to have both evaluators. They work together. We're a team, and we complement one another. You can't evaluate a kid in behavior without including the academic. That is,
when they're in an academic situation and they're probably reacting to not being able to understand or, participate as well. Yes.
Right. So I have an LSSP, licensed special school psychologist. And what they do is they evaluate for the behavior. And we're not talking about misbehavior. We're just talking about emotional behavior.
Right.
It could be ADHD. It can be anxiety. It can be emotional. It can be several variations of what they're in. There are others, but those are my top three that I deal with most of all with my, not deal with what my parents have concern of. And so once they do the behavior piece, I do the academic piece. So I do the cognitive and the academic, or I hire one of my associates to do that piece. Then we collaborate. So we come together, we put our results together, and then we put the informal information together. There'll be parent interviews, there'll be student interviews. A lot of the behavior information is rating scales. Okay. So there are a lot of information that they pull as well as doing formal evaluation. So it's both. Again, by law, we have to use multiple sources of data, and we will not use just one formal evaluation because a child, reacts differently when they sharing things openly versus giving an answer on a formal evaluation test. Sometimes you can get more out of them just by asking them a simple question, And so that data is pulled together, and then we form a good report based on that. And so it's the parent's choice if they want to have a public school, and what we call it, public schools call it psychological evaluations. So neuro evaluations, from my experience and my background, doctors can do it too. They do some evaluation, but theirs is not as thorough. So they're not going to go over sociological. They're not going to go over, health screening. They're not going to do, you're going to get a pretty kind of structured basis, which is good. It's sufficient. But when you need a plan for the teacher,
yes, and that's really what homeschool parents need the most.
Right.
That
you
plan.
Need a plan.
What do I use this information for?
You need a plan. So we're real thorough. It's tailor made to develop a plan, individual plan. So whatever it gives you, the report, what we give you, and we have recommendations at the end.
Yes,
and we form an actual plan tailor made for your child. So you know what steps to use and how to better assess them in each area. So every area need, whether it be short-term memory, long-term memory, comprehension, you have an itemized plan, accommodations to put in place. And that is the huge
that's
key.
What I think our parents really are looking for is what am I going to get the information that I need to really help my student by going through this process and investing this money. It's an investment.
Yes,
I have to say. But when you work with somebody like Tasha versus just going to the school district, and the school district is not going to do that for you because they can tell you the services they can provide if you drop your child off. That will keep your child at the equivalent level of all their age, same age classmates.
Right.
But it's not going to help them individually to keep on that process of working and at their own pace and getting all the supports they need for learning for them. Yes. Yeah. So the one question I always had from parents, because, we are a virtual society as we're doing this remotely and we live in the same city,
I know.
is why can't I do my evaluation online? And I know you have a good answer to this.
Yes, because it's funny you said it, because at the end of every report, I have testing observations, right? Yes. And that's why it's so important. Whoever evaluated the child needs to do the report. Why? Needs to write the report. I have some people in the past have tested and have somebody else do the report in the district. And I would never. That's something that I just would not do. But the reason why, because when you're evaluating a kid up close, live, there are certain nuances that you see that you do not get virtually.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
you need that child in front of you, eyes on him or her, because you want to make sure that you can see every detail of what it is that they're doing. So sometimes you can see that I can't feel their emotions while they're on their virtual. I can't see,
Right.
whether their eyes are really tired or whether they're feeling,
Yeah.
what their state of mind is. But when I'm up close, and I can see them firsthand, and also distractions.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
too many distractions when you're at home. You got, so many things going on. But when you're in my office, I have a separate waiting area. I have a door closed. It's so quiet, and it's just me and the student one-on-one. And that's
Right.
one of the things that when you're testing, if there is a distraction in the middle of a test, and that's particular cluster, you have to stop that cluster. And you have to start over or either start
Oh,
another evaluation. Yes, you're not supposed to have any interruption. It's just that important because that child loses their train of thought.
right.
And you have
Absolutely.
to pick up, and this is something where I talk about nuances, and you want to make sure that you're going back to the first parent's question, how do you know it's valid?
Right. Yes.
Validity. When you're not being distracted and there are no interruptions. That's a huge part of validity. So
Yeah.
virtual is just for this type of testing for your child, it would be best not to do virtual because you don't want any nuances to interfere and you don't want anything to not be reliable or valid.
Right. Yes,
So
and
yeah,
especially when you're investing in this time
yes,
and funds,
yes,
to have it thrown off by someone not noticing that your child's fidgeting under the table right now,
right,
or a lot of other things, or you have a noise canceling microphone
right,
and you don't know the dog's barking and has been barking the
right.
entire hour you've been
So
testing.
true. So true. That's a very real thing.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, there's just so many things that get involved in there.
Yes.
Um, so good answers. Um, love that, and I'm sure a lot of our parents have been thinking about that.
Yes.
Um, and all those questions. So testing then takes anywhere from a day to broken up. I guess it depends on how many evaluations you determine with the parent. What on average is a length of the testing process and then the length for getting an evaluation usually or the end product?
Okay. For me, my parents like to do in the morning. And if your baby's not a morning kid, that's perfectly fine. I like to work in 4-hour increments. I think 4 hours is plenty enough time. You go to 5 and 6 hours in a day, just like a work day, and I think it's a lot on one kid to do sit down testing, even with breaks. It's a little bit, it's too intense, I believe.
Right.
So I typically do a 4-hour window. We start at 10, we end at 2. We take a lunch for 30 minutes. I typically have my parents tell their child to bring their lunch. I think when they come and I have a waiting area again. I have area for lunch. It's very convenient so they can bring their lunch, take a 30-minute lunch. And then if they want to take a break in the morning and a break in the afternoon, we can. And then we shut down at 2, maybe 2 to 2:30, depending on if we're wrapping up the last evaluation for the day. Then we come back again, maybe the next day or the following day. Depends on the parent's schedule. So we do 2 days of evaluation of 4-hour increments. Now, I typically do a 10 to 2, but if my parents say, hey, Sarah's not a morning person, I would rather her do, noon to 4. I'm okay with that. So it has worked very, very well. I do like my kids to have a little bit of breakfast, a light breakfast in the morning. Nothing heavy, but just something to get in their appetite in the morning because it gets their brain.
That's good to know.
Yeah, their juice is flowing in the morning.
Yes, but they're not fatigued because they've eaten so much and their brain's just like trying to process or their stomach's processing and they have no blood for their brain.
Exactly. So I'm like, just a little bit, Mom, Dad. Just, have to be a full course. Just some fruit or toast or orange juice, just something, banana, whatever. Just something that is not too much sugar and, too heavy, but just something light, a nice light breakfast. bring their lunch, bring, if a snack, if they want to, they can bring their water, because we'll take a break. And some of my kids, my older kids, like I test up until 12th grade, my seniors and my juniors, they're good. They don't need another break at the end. But my elementary, they may want a little break in between. I give them a little snack and they have their water or their drink. And then we'll do that for the second time, if maybe a third if we need it. Typically, most of my kids, I just need a 2-day. We get a lot done in those 2 days. After that, we start formulating the report. So what I will do is gather some more data from mom and dad or whoever the guardian is. We'll look at everything that they provided to me, make sure they have a vision and hearing screening. That's one of the main things you want to make sure your baby has updated vision and hearing screening. So by law, they have to pass a vision and hearing screening. And it can be from the pediatrician. You don't have to go to vision and hearing. You don't have to go to ear, nose, and throat doctor. You don't have to go to the.
You have to go to a specialist or of any sort.
Got it. You can even get it from, if you're in the public school, you get it from the nurse, because the nurse does screening. That's all the law requires, a vision and hearing screening. So, but if you have something from your pediatrician, perfect. Just make sure it's within the calendar year. Okay, that's perfectly fine. Then we'll start gathering data for the report. Typically, my reports would take, depending on what my caseload is with my kiddos, but about 2 weeks. And we can usually get it done within those 2 weeks. And once we get that report done, what we do is set up a meeting. I do a Zoom meeting. I do have a conference area for my parents to come in and we can go over the report. But Peggy, you said something, virtually nobody wants to leave home if they don't have to.
Yep, absolutely.
So we do a Zoom meeting, and they always choose the Zoom meeting. So we do a Zoom meeting and we go over the report line by line, and I have a shared screen.
Oh, that's so important.
Every detail and all the questions, whatever they need. And a lot of my parents want me to be an educational consultant after. So I help. I still provide services. I help with plans and, the academic area. So even after testing, I'm still accessible to helping them as they navigate.
Yes. Because I know a lot of our parents are writing homeschool IEPs, individualized education plans. They want to track those goals. They want to have that documentation in place. And so having somebody like you to come alongside them, they feel more empowered and they feel like that I'm not missing anything. Because a lot of times parents are like, I'm not an educator. I don't know anything about all of these needs of my child. But if you have a team around you, and people like Tasha, you feel like much more confident in moving forward and teaching your students. And that's really, really important. The more confident you are, the more confident your child's going to be that they're making successes too.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
So you had said something about every 2 to 3 years. Now, is that something for the public school system, or is there something developmentally that parents should be aware of, that testing should happen on a regular basis like that? Say a child is, meeting goals, everything from the previous assessments fine at home. Would an assessment be necessary, or could that be something that could be lengthened out for a homeschool student? I know in the public schools, it is required every 2 to 3 years to keep services. Right. But I'm just wondering from a homeschool perspective, if that time frame would be the same. And why?
No, not. It's a little bit different than homeschool. So in the school district, like you said, 2 to 3, if the child has been evaluated already. Right. So let's say we do what's called an initial evaluation. That's the first evaluation.
Right.
Most districts go 3 because, of course, if they can get more time.
Right, exactly.
They want to do it. But you can do it as soon as 2 because you don't want to submit the same information they just had a year before. It's still kind of fresh and new. You want it to be valid. You don't want to be something that's repetitive that they've seen before and they can remember. And it's going to be at a different level because they're a year older, 2 years older. So they're going to have a different level of that test anyway. But that's typically for the public schools. At home, it's not really no set guidelines that you have to do. Right. 2 to 3 years to evaluate them if you want. It's at the parent's discretion. But I would say it would help the child if you would keep monitoring that every 2 to 3 years. Even if you don't do a formal evaluation, you would want to look at the accommodations. Maybe something needs to change.
Right.
Maybe you need to tweak some things, because even after being evaluated, after maybe 3 months, you may notice, what?
Right.
we need to make some changes and some adjustments,
Yep.
So I think that's very good because they're growing, they're learning, they're transitioning.
Right.
You talk about from elementary to middle school. I mean, that's worlds apart, even from
absolutely.
second to third grade. I taught second grade for 4 years and third grade for 3 years. And I taught them back to back. And I saw the transition literally from 2 to 3 years, second grade to third grade. They're worlds apart.
Right.
So you really have to, stay on top of that to make sure that you're not still operating. You're wondering why the progress is not happening, but maybe we need to change some of the accommodations that they got 2 years ago.
Right.
Maybe we need to change some of the pieces, they may need more, they may need more because they're changing, they're growing, they're developing, they're transitioning, and
right.
So I would recommend, even if we don't do a full eval, which most of my parents still recommend after 2 to 3 years, I would definitely want to look at the plan and see how we can modify that plan and meet those needs. And remember, the evaluation is not just for the current time. You're preparing for the next grade level up.
Right. Yes.
Absolutely. You're trying to think ahead. So you want to prepare them for what they're coming into. And that helps with, again, Peggy, like you said, their confidence.
Oh, yes.
They're confident.
Absolutely.
When they come in, more prepared, much better at what they're expecting to do. And they start becoming familiar through repetition and things like that. So we want to set them up real good for the new school year. And I want to go back to something real quick.
Yeah.
One of the advantages of doing summer, because when you do it at the beginning of the school year, it takes, the school district has 45 school days to get everything done. You're talking about school days.
Yes.
That's a pretty lengthy time. So when by me doing it in the summer, it allows the parents to, even at homeschool, you have time to prepare your child for the fall, even if you're not in the public school system. It's just have them ready. Having the needs met, knowing what plan, having their plan before school starts, so that way you can hit the ground running. And
absolutely, and you're not changing things. You start and then you have to completely make a shift, and that's so hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So I always like to let them know the advantages of that. So that's what the 2 to 3 years was referring to.
Got it.
If we're not evaluating, we want to make sure that we're not letting too much time lapse before we do an update on those plans.
Got it.
So,
yes. Yep. So sometimes I know I've heard from some parents that especially when they do testing through the public school system, a lot of them want to do a classroom observation. I think it's just in the test. And so a lot of parents are lacking in that because they don't have a classroom situation or their child's in a co-op and the co-op has closed doors to outside officials. Okay. And so a lot of them struggle with that. How do I get that classroom evaluation? So how do you handle that from your side? I want to hear your answer to that.
Okay, that's a good question. I have a form, a parent form and a teacher form. And it's a teacher academic behavior form and a parent academic behavior form. Okay. And it goes over the academic piece and the behavior, not misbehavior, but observations of behavior. So we're talking about attentiveness, focus, things like that. Yeah. How long they can sit down, things like that. So typically in the public school, there is a classroom observation, right? Okay. But the observation from my homeschool parents is what they observe at home. Okay. And then what I observe when I'm evaluating them and based on my data that I received from the parents. The other thing I do is what's called an adaptive behavior. Now, in the school district, adaptive behavior is only required if a child is under a 70, average 70 and below in the cognitive ability, right? Okay. But for me, for my business, I do a formal adaptive behavior because I just want more data. I'm very thorough in my reports, Peggy. You know that. Oh, yes. I'm very thorough. And so what I do is I do a formal adaptive behavior. So what that does is that gives me more information about how the child adapts from home and with the academic piece. Okay. And it gives you a variation of all the different things that parents may not think about that affects them academically.
Right. Absolutely. So those checklists are amazing because it makes you think of things that you would just never think about. Wow. This would affect their learning. I never thought about that.
Right. So I do it for all my kids across the board. So that's an observation piece because it's formal. Okay. Okay.
Right.
Now, the observations that we do in the classroom is informal. It's very subjective. It depends on what you caught at that time. Doesn't
Right.
mean Johnny couldn't do
Absolutely.
it. It's just what your eyes, what you saw in that 30 minutes or that 45 minutes, right? So, but the adaptive behavior gives you more information and more data to look at that's linked to the cognitive ability. So adaptive behavior is another analogy. They're like brother and sister. They are one and the same. So the adaptive behavior affects the cognitive ability. And so I like to do formal because it gives me, again, more data. And the more data I have, multiple sources of data, the better we're going to be able to help that child.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
We have both pieces. I have the informal, the teacher behavior academic form, or the parent behavior, a homeschool behavior academic form. So it gives me both pieces plus the formal, and we have a plethora of observation to use as a tool to give us the best valid information for the report.
That's that I love that explanation, because that answers that question so thoroughly. So thank you for addressing it, and for what you do too, because I think parents just kind of think, well, I'm at a loss if my student's not in a classroom, but you just told us you're really not.
No, you're not.
There are other things, and there's better ways actually to observe a student from that perspective. So I want to approach some high school level things. We had a question come in from Mizra, and she asked, once you have a diagnosis, does it affect future employment, college entrance, volunteer work, firearm purchases? How difficult can it be to remove a diagnosis or multiple diagnoses?
Right. Well, parents are a huge part of the process. And a lot of my parents don't realize how significant their decision-making is a part of the process. So when we're diagnosing a kid, when you get to that level, at the secondary level, if you are still identified and eligible for whatever diagnosis is, typically you have to start with like a community college, right?
Yes.
But if you're not, and you chose, I think we're good. We're gonna, we're not gonna go forth with special needs anymore. We think he's, okay, then that changes that. But as far as employment, if y'all been noticing, they have so many jobs out there now than what they had before, where they're offering things for kids who may have ADHD or AU, autism, and things like that. So it's really about doing your research and looking at what fits your student best and well. So let's just say if their strength is, I know some of my boys, my gentlemen, they may struggle in reading, but they're stronger in math. Yes. And then writing, they just don't really care to write for math, but they can write.
Yes, that was my oldest.
So the results come out and we see, oh man, he has strengths in this area, but he has an area of need in this area. So I look at what the strengths are. So if their strength is fluid reasoning is an area where it's highly tied to math. So I would look at something where that's a strength for them. So you just want to find areas in employment that is conducive to their strengths. And I think that's what it is, the main thing. And doing your research. There is no cookie cutter certain type of employment for a certain child. I think for any kid, it's about what their strength is and what they enjoy. Right. But the research, I would say, to tell mom or dad, the research is what you have to do for the employment, but it's not a hindrance to them being able to be employed. It's just finding the best environment for them that can complement their strengths, and you'll still accommodate them where they have needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And we've seen that with our own kids. My oldest was diagnosed on the spectrum when he was 5, and he chose when he went to college not to get accommodations, not to be re-diagnosed. Right. And that was his choice. And so he knew what he was going up against, that he had some things he was going to just have to advocate through without saying, I've got, this struggle. Right. And he did great. And then I've got 2 other kids, one actually that qualifies for disability because his back is such a mess. And so, yes, but I think they choose, and it's not on any of my kids' official, medical paperwork, unless they choose.
That's it, Mom. That's it,
yes.
Peggy. Unless they choose it. Exactly. That's what I was saying before. Yeah, it's a choice.
Absolutely. Because that paperwork isn't like filed in some,
No.
place where everybody can access it.
No.
And so I think a lot of parents, I think the only thing where you would have issues like with a firearm purchase would be a mental health diagnosis where your child was actually admitted
Right.
to the hospital.
Right.
And if they were hospitalized for that condition, then that would be on a publicly accessible record
Right.
of some sort.
Right.
So, but
I did want to add to that. I wanted to add to that. I'm going to cut you off, Peggy.
Yes. No, please do.
The confidential, you said something. That is very important. This is a confidential report. This is a legally, federally mandated report. That means that it's just between parents sign off and give permission for me or whoever else is a part of their educational team. Outside of that, they have the authority to allow anybody they want to view or not view. And I do not have any authority to give that report to anyone other than the parent. And the parent makes the choice. They agree, okay, I've released top assessment to do A, B, C, and D. Right. And that's their choice. Yeah, and that's part of the documentation and paperwork that I send out to my parents during the consultation. So they get to see all that information ahead of time, so they are at ease. And another thing, if they change their mind and they decide, you know what, I think I want my child to get help when they go to college, whether it's community college or four-year college, with writing. So if they want to get an accommodation, you don't need a report. Technically, if you want a certain type of accommodation, yes, you have to serve a proof, right? Verification. Right. Okay.
Yes, but I did want to address that too.
Yes, you have to show verification if you want that accommodation. But if you don't feel like they need it, then that's fine. But to have that accommodation, it is there. I have a student, she was a senior. She was working, and I'm so happy. She just got a scholarship at her job that she was working. It was a scholarship for her just to help her out, get her started. And she wasn't even really thinking about college at first. And we did the evaluation. Now she's excited and looking towards that. And I evaluated her about maybe 4 months ago.
Okay.
And so she's a senior now. She's a senior now going to school. Yeah. So she's going to probably start out at a community college. She want to just kind of get her feet wet and, want to see what it's like, but it's not some record where they're keeping track. It's in a federal database or something, and they're making marks and blocking interests of this and that. No, if you don't want that to be a part of their, as homeschool parents. Now, public school system.
Public school, yes, that's in their record if you get evaluated through the public school.
That's a little different. But homeschool, that's your confidential information that you can keep or you can share. That's at your discretion. But So
if a student was in that high school, I think I'd like accommodations possibly in a job or in college. When is that like adult level diagnoses best to get? Is it something they do in high school or towards the end of their high school career that would be much more effective for using that diagnosis? I
think the sooner the better for that child. I would say at least 2 years before. If you're thinking that there is, I really just say the earlier the better, because it takes time to do that evaluation process. It takes time for a child to learn themselves and learn these accommodations. And then I think,
yeah, that's a good point, because if you haven't used an accommodation for a long period of time and then you approach a college or a workplace and say, well, this is the accommodation I need. And they say, well, how has it worked for you in the past? You can't say anything. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yes. So I'll say at least 2 years before. But if you notice and you have a freshman this year and you feel like, you know what, we've been contemplating this for 2 years, and you strongly feel like the support system you need to be evaluated, I would not put it off. Okay. You want them to leave. You want them to leave confident. And one of the positive things about evaluation, I always point out, because I'm a very positive person by nature.
You absolutely.
I am, you know that, Peggy. But, I tell my parents, I said, you'll be amazed what you see. Has so many strengths. It's going to give you a lot of answers to questions. Why? I had one parent, why they can remember things from 2 years ago, but they couldn't remember what the teacher or what they learned last week. I said, because their short-term memory is there's a need, but their long-term memory is strong. And that's one of the things that we evaluate. So it gives you so many strengths that your child has that you couldn't really figure out why, but you knew they were there. Now it all makes sense. Oh, so it's not that they didn't want to learn and they didn't, want to do it. It's just that that's a struggle for them. There's two areas of memory. You don't have just one type of memory. You have short-term memory and you have long-term memory, and they're not one and the same.
Right.
So
Yes.
they're two different spectrums. So you can have a strength in one area and a need in another, and now explains, okay, now, and then that helps the child to be confident because they're not frustrated thinking, okay, why can't I get this? Why? Sweetie, you just need a little bit more accommodations. Every child needs that. We just give you a little bit more time.
Right.
That's it.
Yes,
just a little
absolutely.
more time, or maybe we can chunk it. Don't give them so much at one time,
Right.
It's all about planning. And once you know what your child's strengths and needs are, you can plan better.
Yes. That's so good. And I do want parents to know too, we've done, we did an episode or broadcast quite a while ago about college accommodations. And so I know we didn't really address that here, but if your student's kind of making that transition, just know that if your student even puts those in place, they don't even have to divulge them to their professor unless it is needed in that specific class. So your child doesn't, like, when they register for class, the professor is like, oh no, here comes a student who needs all these things from me. No, it isn't divulged unless they say, oh yeah, this is a real struggle. They can have those things already in place, and then they can reveal that they need like extra notes or whatever is needed, that they've been approved for accommodations can be put in place immediately. So you can go back and listen to that episode in full. So I'll make sure I get the link in there too, in the description. And Tasha has you have a couple of YouTube videos that you're going to share with us. What are in those? I'll put the links in the description here on YouTube as well as the podcast.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, it's answering other questions of what the test involves and what kind of testing I do. It goes over the areas of what I test and the background of my testing, and just letting my parents know that I'm accessible to psychological tests, academic tests, which is called psychoeducational. Okay. So you have psychological and you have psychoeducational.
Oh, okay.
And those are two different types of evaluation. Psychological includes behavior, cognitive, and achievement. And then psychoeducational is just the cognitive and achievement.
Okay.
So you have some without behavior and some with behavior. It just lets you know I do advocacy services. I'm an educational consultant. I do professional development, presentations, things like that. So it gives them an overview. They're like about 30. One of them is maybe a minute and a half, and one is about 30 seconds. So mom and dad won't take up too much time.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those links with us. And also Tasha has a website, Top Assessment, TX, that's for Texas.com.
Yes.
And so you can visit her at that website too and connect with her on there. So Leslie, you had put a question in that she said this very topic of the show is my question. Should I get a diagnosis? So hopefully we have helped you figure out if that is a yes or no to your answer. And I think it's going to be different for everybody in every situation. And I always tell people, if you have peace, then that's where if you're feeling anxious, continue to pray about it. Yeah, just pray about it. Because I think a lot of times we rush into things and we do it for the wrong reasons. And so, and I know Tasha's a fellow believer, and so we both just want to encourage you, just pray into it. You'll get the diagnoses for your child if necessary in the right time. Don't feel like you're too late either. I think I beat myself up a lot about not catching things with my kids, and God didn't beat me up about it. It was the right timing for each of them.
Right.
So,
that's it.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
Good,
and we had one more comment while we were chatting. It's only homeschooling said in-person assessment is so important.
Yes.
And so just reiterating that fact that we talked about earlier.
In person.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And parents, if they have any questions, call me. Any additional questions, I can consult with you and, give you any additional information that you may think of later, questions you may have. So I am available.
Yes. And two, if you end up putting a question in the YouTube feed, which I know some people do because they'll like watch this, years later.
Right.
Just know that we do respond to those and we send them to our interviewee so they can answer the question, and then we'll put their response, or we'll just tell them this is where the link is to the video. Could you respond? So, we want to make sure you get your questions answered, because I know a lot of you just, you don't have the ability to go out to homeschool conferences, and you just want to do the best for your student. And so that's why we do these broadcasts, and we really want to help in any way we can in this process. Well, thank you so much, Tasha. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and I'm glad that you made it through the traffic and got here.
Yes. You already knew it was traffic.
Oh, yes, I know. And where your office is, that's where I go and get my acupuncture, and I know how crazy that can be in that area of town.
Yes, you already knew. Yes. I'm glad I was able to be here.
Yes. Yeah, I'm too. I had an opening for this, and I said to Tasha, I know exactly what we should talk about.
It was perfect.
Yes. Yeah. This is a great conversation. I know a lot of you we're looking forward to this. So thank you for joining us, everybody. We are going to dive into a new topic next month about just how to accommodate curriculum based on different teaching methodologies. And so next week, we're going to talk about assistive technology and how assistive technology can help you based on how you homeschool. And so that that's what we're going to be chatting about next week with our guests. So, and then we're going to dive into some other homeschooling methodologies and different ways you can tweak and change that to make it more accessible for your students. So that's what we'll be covering in June. So I'm excited about that new topic that we're diving into. And we wrapped up nonverbal teaching. If you missed all of that, we had 4 episodes on that already this month. So I know a lot of you had said, wow, I've had this student I haven't really been able to connect with as much, and now I feel equipped. And so I'm so glad that we were able to find some guests that empowered you in that area as well. So thanks so much, Tasha. It was great having you back on the show.
Thank you.
We'll definitely have to have you back again sometime soon.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to call me anytime.
I will. Yes.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. This is what I do.
Oh, yes. Well, keep doing what you're doing because it's very important, and you help a lot of families, and they are just so blessed by what you do. So keep up the good work. Absolutely. Well, thank all of you for joining us, and I'll see you next week right here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Until then, God bless everybody. Take care. Goodbye. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Hi, friend. Are you stressed? Maybe even worried about so many needs around you that you've forgotten you are worth taking care of too? Well, I'm Bonnie Gray, the host of Breathe, the Stress Less podcast. I want to invite you to join me as I share practical tips based on science, inspired by God's Word, to help you spark joy and restore God's peace and love to your soul. Subscribe now and go to lifeaudio.com.